Back with us on the Washington Journal, it is Illinois Democrat Sean Casten. He serves on the Financial Services Committee. And Congressman, before we get to some of the looming fiscal deadlines and the congressional agenda, I just want to start with the question that we posed to Democratic viewers at the very beginning of today's program. We asked the question to Democrats, are you satisfied with the direction of your party right now? How would you answer that question?
It frankly feels very lonely right now to feel like so many things that we take for granted as Americans are being defended solely by the Democratic Party, and I think it's hard for a lot of us to process that. I mean, do you have a Fifth Amendment right to due process? Do you have a 14th Amendment right to equal protection under the law? Do you have an 8th Amendment right to not be subject to cruel and unusual punishment? All of these things matter to the American people, and they are defended on a purely partisan basis right now. And I love my Democratic colleagues. Some of them are better at articulating that issue than others, and that's fine. We've got a fair amount of diversity. But like I said, it's just lonely to feel like we have to defend those things on a partisan basis that we used to think were universal.
Who are the Democratic Party's national leaders right now? Who would you say is the leader of the party?
I think we're going to find out. I think leaders are made in times like this. They are not assigned. I'd remind you that back in I came into Congress in 2018, and at the time Donald Trump was in the White House. The House was controlled by Republicans. The Senate was controlled by Republicans, and I don't know how you would have answered the question at that time. Would you have said it was Chuck Schumer? Would you have said it was Nancy Pelosi? I don't know. And obviously, that we had a lot of success in 2018. But when you don't control the executive branch, when you're not the leader of one of the two houses, it's difficult to get the national spotlight. I think Hakeem has done an excellent job of running the House. But that's a different job than being a national leader. I think that'll change a little bit in the next year and a half, as people start throwing their hats in the ring to run for president, and we'll start to see some people have some national messaging. But I think that's okay. We'll find out who catches fire.
Since coming to Congress, you're known as somebody who is happy to talk to constituents and hold town halls. Are you planning more town halls for the upcoming August recess? And if so, what is the message you're going to be bringing to your constituents?
Yeah, so I've averaged a town hall a month since I've gotten in, and we do a mix between in-person and telephone. I always joke that an in-person town hall is a conversation and a telephone town hall is a lecture. On the other hand, you get a lot more people in a telephone town hall. What I've found in the last couple that I've done, and I don't expect this will be any difference, is the questions have become sort of existential. I'm used to doing town halls where you say, here's what Congress is working on, here's what I'm working on, here's some constituent services we can offer. And some people, of course, say, I like what you're working on. Some people don't like it. Why did you vote on this? That's all pretty easy. I mean, it's important, but it's pretty easy. What's been really tough the last couple town halls is people are asking these questions like, I'm fully documented, I'm an American citizen, but I have brown skin. What should I do if ICE arrests me? That's a really hard question to answer. People saying, will the courts protect us, and what if they don't move quickly enough? These are sort of deep, fundamental questions about democracy, and I've found that we need to be out there, we need to be talking to people, we need to be sharing what we know, we need to provide hope where we can, but also be realistic. I increasingly feel like it's sort of like a Winston Churchill moment where the purpose of those town halls is to let people know that I have nothing to promise you but blood, sweat, and tears. I know that if we don't fight, we will lose, and I can't guarantee that if we do fight, we'll win. But it's pretty heavy.
Does the rise in political violence, and by that I mean violence specifically against politicians for simply being a politician and being in a position of power, does it give you pause as you are somebody who is, again, known for in-person town halls?
It is certainly a concern. We have a much larger police, both uniformed and ununiformed presence in our town halls than we used to. I had someone get on the stage with me that we had to have forcibly removed from an event, and that happens. I've never personally felt physically threatened. Candidly, I'm a straight white guy. People don't come at me the way they come at other people. But it's a concern. I mean, certainly some of my colleagues, and out of respect, won't name them. They've shared stories of people calling their office in the morning and reading to them their schedule for the day, sending pictures to them with pictures of their car with the license plates. That's really heavy stuff, and we shouldn't require as a condition to service that you may have to martyr yourself. But it's a reality of the moment we're in right now, that threat is out there.
Congressman Sean Casten is our guest, Democrat from Illinois. Familiar to C-SPAN viewers, phone lines are open for you to call. Democrats, Republicans, and Independents will put the numbers on the screen. As they're calling in, Congressman, let me come to some of those looming fiscal deadlines that we mentioned off the top. What's your expectation after the August recess for what happens as we come to September 30th, a funding deadline, potential government shutdown?
I mean, you should have Mike Johnson on to ask these questions. We have only gotten one appropriations bill through the House on a purely partisan basis. There's absolutely no way we're going to get the rest of those appropriations through. The calendar has been hung up because the House and Senate Republican leadership decided to prioritize first Trump's tax cutting bill and then this rescission package, which essentially says that money that Congress has appropriated, the White House doesn't want to spend, and Congress, on a straight party line basis, gave the White House approval to not spend that money. So, things you depend on like PBS and NPR, they've just decided to cut. The fact that they prioritized that chewed up time on the calendar, but it also created a real crisis of trust, because for those of us who's, we have the power of the purse, our job is to set funding levels, and to have that funding taken back raised real question amongst our appropriators of why should we trust you the next time? And so the stakes are going to be pretty high. I would like to tell you that we are working to push that forward this week. As it turns out, last night, Johnson decided not to bring any bills to the floor this week. They shut down the Rules Committee because they didn't want to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. So I'm not even sure if we're going to have a whole week. It looks like our August recess might start early right now because they don't want to go after a pedophile. I mean, it's really hard to look at what they're doing and saying you're justifying the right things, especially when we are running out of time to keep the government open.
The lead opinion column in today's New York Times is Ben Bernanke, Janet Yellen, former chairs of the Federal Reserve, writing about the need for an independent Federal Reserve. As a member of the Financial Services Committee, what do you think would happen if Donald Trump fired Jerome Powell?
Well, ironically, interest rates would go up, because if the rest of the world doesn't trust that the United States has a non-political treasury, then the question is, why should we buy U.S. Treasury bonds? And we've already seen one downgrade. We never had that before. The U.S. was always the AAA rating, and we saw a downgrade recently. We've seen a dynamic over the last several months where you saw money moving out of U.S. equity markets at the same time it was moving out of treasuries. That's not supposed to happen, and it's because money was looking for another haven. So there would be a bitter irony if Donald Trump, in deciding that he doesn't like the fact that Jay Powell is not lowering rates, fires him and causes markets to raise rates. But there's a really good reason for an independent Fed. You want your monetary policy to be counter-cyclical. When the economy is running really hot, you want to make money a little bit more expensive to cool it down so you don't blow up a bubble. When the economy is in a bad way, you want to make it a little bit easier to get money. That's counter to the politics, right? If you're the president and you're running a booming economy and you're a year away from the election, politically you wouldn't want to slow down the economy, even though that might be the right thing to do fiscally. So it's really important that we have an independent Fed, and a lot of the strength of our economy and the reason why the rest of the world wants to invest in the United States, wants to use the dollar as their reserve currency, is because they trust that our monetary policy is set by someone who is insulated from the political process. And this isn't something that you just break and then you fix it. if you break that, it will take a long, long time to repair that damage. And on the back end of that, we may not be the world's reserve currency anymore. So that, I mean, the president's playing with something very dangerous right now.